Is there a Chicago political machine still?
Yes,
Okay.
there is.
That's a big asset. Then who's in charge of it?
Okay, so I mean, the short answer is Chicago Board of Trade. And it's a little harder to connect the dots than it was under Daley, because Daley ran everything with such, well, both Daleys ran everything with such an iron fist, and it was built around patronage, whereas I think now that model has certainly changed. And I think TIF funds play a front and center role in that, sort of. I mean, you know, it's no coincidence, for example, that a company like Vienna Beef, who donates to Rahm Emanuel's campaign, gets $5 million that actually belongs in children's classrooms. And it's that corporate sort of, I don't know how you want to call it, but yeah, that corporate form of patronage, I think, is the new form of the political machine.
Then what does the political machine do these days?
So I think if you look at Uptown, I think to a lesser extent, you know, Rogers Park here in the 49th Ward, but if you go down to the 46th Ward with Alderman Kappelman, you know, this was a section of the city that's historically known for affordable and low-income housing, like the Wilson Men's Hotel, for example. And during Kappelman's, last 2 years, despite promising not to go after low-income housing, that's exactly what he's done, and sponsored and pushed different SROs to well, flats. I don't know if you're familiar with flats. A real estate developer has been buying out these low-income housing to the tune where it's like 1,500 units in the last 2 years are gone, and not a single one has been replaced. So to answer your question, it's kind of clear that they want to change. They want to turn Uptown from a working-class neighborhood into an entertainment district. You know, when you think about all like the Red Line construction, how they rebuilt some of the stations up on the north side, although they did it one at a time, compared to the largely black south side, which they just decided to eviscerate. You know, and they talked about rebuilding, I don't know if you saw the plans, they wanted to rebuild Wilson Stop. You know, now granted that station could use a little facelift, but I would argue that they're not rebuilding it for the people who live there, they're rebuilding it for the people they want to move in. So I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, it's all about real estate. Massive land grab.
That's good or bad for the city?
Well, it's like the people who live in those low-income housing, right? They're like, Kappelman was like, well, that's okay. We can go send them up to the what's that? The Astor House or something. It's like Patton Ashley.
Yeah, Astor House.
Yeah, and of course they just got bought, and so they got kicked out of it. So where are they going to go? So I mean, if you're rich, I'm sure that works out really nice. If you're not, you're totally screwed.
What would you change about the system?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think any private real estate developer should be getting tax money, period. End of story. I think the taxpayers deserve that money in the form of public services, in the form of public education. So that's number one. We need to stop incentivizing people to, like, literally, you know, evict tenants from low-income housing. I think secondly, you know, the banks, you know, play a secondary role in that. They're also fronting, you know, financing for these projects and for this development, and the city isn't taxing them like they could. You know, they've been suggested, for example, that the Chicago Board of Trade that just I think it was like a 25-cent tax on every financial transaction downtown, which hardly noticeable to the players involved, would raise millions of revenue. and they won't do it. They just don't want to tax the banks.
How did they manage to get that not passed? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the same way they do anything. I mean, the mayor kind of runs this city council like they're a bunch of lackeys. You know, I think like.
Even Emmanuel?
Yeah, Emmanuel. Yes. You know, it was a big question when he was first elected. Would the city council sort of, you know, bend to his iron will, you know, like they did with Daley? And it's like, if you go against the mayor, that's when garbage stops getting collected in your ward. And that's when significant sums of money start finding themselves into your opposition. And it's basically proof that the machine works because, you know, look at Alderman Joe Moore here in Rogers Park, you know, the champion of participatory budgeting, the champion of participatory democracy, and when 89% of the city demands an elected school board, who's the one guy that puts the kibosh on it? Specifically at the request of Mayor Emanuel. It's Joe Moore. Turns out is also a person.
So much.
Yeah.
And who are you?
Oh, my name's John Snowden. I live here in Rogers Park.